course.
Great, thank you.
Hi, how are you?
Hello, Mr. Schiff. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
I know that you work for investigation regarding Trump and Russian government.
Yes,
We know some important information about it.
and that is documented as well in materials you want to provide to us.
Yes, could I explain you where we are?
Yes, of course, but again, I would just caution that our Russian friends may be listening to the conversation, so I wouldn't share anything over the phone that you don't want them to hear.
No, I don't think that it will impact on our investigation.
Yes. Well, please go ahead then.
In November 2013, Mr. Trump visited Moscow. He visited competition Miss Universe, and there he met with the Russian journalist and celebrity Ksenia Sobchak.
I'm sorry, can you explain that again? While he was in Moscow in November 2013, he met with a journalist
Well, she's poor journalist, but anyway, she became famous because of Putin is her godfather.
Okay, Putin's godfather. Okay.
She also known as a person who provided girls for escort for oligarchs, and she met with Trump and she brought him one-hour Russian girl, celebrity Olga Buzova, who also known as a person with a strange reputation.
Olga, and how do you spell her name?
Olga Buzova.
Buzova. So
Yes.
Olga Buzova is a friend of the reporter Sobchak?
Yes, she's a friend of reporter and I think the special agent of Russian Secret Service, Ksenia Sobchak.
That Sobchak is or Olga is?
No, Sobchak is Ksenia.
Okay, and so Buzova met with Trump in New York at some point after the 2013 Miss Universe
Yes,
pageant.
absolutely. And she got compromising materials on Trump after their short relations.
Okay, and what's the nature of the compromise?
Well, there were pictures of naked Trump.
Okay. And so Putin was made aware of the availability of the compromising material?
Yes, of course, Buzova shared those materials with Sobchak, and Sobchak shares those materials with Putin because she's a goddaughter of Putin, and Putin decided to press on Trump.
And the materials that you can provide to the committee or to the FBI, would they corroborate this allegation?
Sure, of course. When they were in Ukraine, we got their conversation by the phone where they discussed those compromising materials. We are ready to provide it to FBI.
So you have recordings of both Sobchak and Buzova where they're discussing the compromising material on Mr. Trump?
Absolutely. And we also know who was a mediator between Trump and Russian government, who met with ex-advisor of Trump, Mr. Flynn. It was the Russian singer, very famous singer, Arkady Ukupnik, who met with Mr. Flynn on Brighton Beach in Brooklyn in a special Russian cafe, Langeron.
What's the name of the cafe?
Langeron.
Langeron?
Yes, it's on the Brighton Beach.
Okay. And
It's a special, it's a Russian district in Brooklyn.
And do you know what was discussed?
They discussed many things, but the most interesting thing is they use a special password before their meetings. When they met each other, they said weather is good on Deribasovskaya.
Weather
It rains.
is good.
Yeah.
In where?
Weather is good on Deribasovskaya. There is a name of a street in Odessa. Did you hear?
Yes, I did. So it's a street in Odessa.
Yes.
And the code word is weather is good on Deribasta?
Deribasovskaya. Deribasovskaya.
Deribasovskaya. Okay. And I'll have my staff follow up to get spellings and more details on that.
Yes. And the second part of their password was it rains again on Brighton Beach.
It rains again on Brighton Beach.
Yes. On that meeting, Okupnik told Flynn that all those compromising materials will never be released if Trump will cancel all Russian sanctions.
Okay. Well, obviously, we would welcome a chance to get copies of those recordings. So we will try to work with the FBI to figure out, along with your staff, how we can obtain copies of those.
Of course, we will provide you all our copies of all our materials, but I also would like to let you know that Sobchak and Buzova will pretty soon visit our country, and we could arrest them and deliver them to your embassy, and we also could extradite them to your country, and you can put them to your special jail, Guantanamo.
Well, I'll be in touch with the FBI about this, and we'll make arrangements with your staff. I think it probably would be best to provide these materials to both our committee and to the FBI. And so we'll make arrangements between my staff and yours on how to facilitate that. And we'll also obviously let the FBI know about Buzova and Sobchak's planned travel to Ukraine.
I also advise you to check all Sobchak's visits in the US, because she was in the US very often, and just to check what she did there actually. And I also would like to look at Russian cafe on Brighton Beach, Langeron, and especially on their head of Russian mafia, Uncle Misha.
Uncle Misha? And
yes.
He's in Brighton Beach?
Yes, he's the head of Russian mafia, and he's located on that restaurant on Brighton Beach.
Okay.
I just want to advise you just look at them, please.
Alrighty. Good. This is very helpful. I appreciate it. Anything else you wanted to add today?
Well, I hope that my information will be useful for you and your committee. And I also would like to advise you, when you or your colleagues will meet Mr. Trump, I advise you to tell him first part of the password on the weather is good on Deribasovskaya, and look how his face will change the color.
And so those passwords were used with Mr. Trump?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We will be back in touch with you through our staff to make arrangements to obtain these materials for our committee and for the FBI. And I appreciate you reaching out to us.
Well, let's be in touch, and I will wait for your response from FBI.
Excellent. I'll have them follow up as soon as possible, and I thank you again.
In Congress.
I live in the 28th Congressional District in California, and my representative is one of your favorites, I'm sure, Adam Schiff. I know that he is many people's favorite, and I get to look at him every single day here in my district.
My commiserations. That is a beautiful segue. We didn't rehearse this, but I'd like to talk about Schiffless. First, a cut from the president's son, Don Jr., talking about Adam Schiff, and then Adam Schiff's response. Let's go to cut 8, please.
This isn't the first time that happened. You saw it right after I did my testimony, and they said, oh, Donald Trump Jr. had the WikiLeaks information because presumably Adam Schiff leaked it right after my testimony. A 99.9% chance he's the guy that was leaking my testimony. CNN is running quotes from noon on about my testimony.
Okay, so that's Don Jr. saying it's got to be Adam Schiff that's leaking from a closed session, a classified session, information from that session, and then he was challenged. Let's listen to Adam Schiff's response.
So just to be precise, yes or no, did you leak any of the information from his testimony?
No, I don't leak, but I do talk about witnesses who are not willing to cooperate. While I don't go into the substance of what they have to say, I do expose when they're making fraudulent claims of privilege.
So what did he just say there? I don't leak, but I do expose people I don't agree. What did he just do there? I mean, ladies and gentlemen, just hang on a second. This is funny because, you know, of who he is.
Yeah.
But it's the congressman from Jennifer Horn's district who is now the chairman of the Intelligence Committee. Do you understand what he just said, Jennifer?
I understand that he basically said he doesn't leak, but he has to tell people like it is. So to me, he just said, I don't leak, I gush. And, how embarrassing. He's the head of the Intelligence Committee. They're supposed to actually keep this stuff under wraps. Shouldn't it be our most trusted individuals that are leading this particular committee of all of them in the House? And we've got this guy who's notorious for leaking. I mean, it was said that he had leaked that there were at least 100 leaks from the House Intel Committee on the Russia investigation. And who do they all have in common? They all seem to link back to Adam Schiff, who hasn't met a CNN camera that he doesn't love.
This is the reality of the world we live in. This is the ideological justification. The ends justifies the means. This is the left for you. They say they don't leak, but then they say, if we don't like your face, we will leak. Isn't that really what they're saying? It's this we get to decide what a leak is.
We're the ultimate boss. They're using it under the terms of this elitism. If we don't like what you're saying, well, then it's okay for us to leak that information to hold you accountable, which is not how things work, at least last time I checked. But Adam Schiff has done this for a really long time. I mean, I know, Seb, that you remember that call from the wacky radio people who called Adam Schiff.
Yes.
And they were trying to give him intel on.
We have the intelligence, Mr. Schiff. We have the intelligence. Can we share the intelligence with you? These were like Ukrainian comedians or something, right?
Right. And what was he doing? You could hear him eagerly writing down, taking notes.
Can I have it? Can I have it? Can we meet? Can I have it, please, sir? It was incredible.
That's right. It was full desperation by Adam Schiff, who, again, has sort of become notorious for these leaks. And I'll tell you, I wish that he would spend less time, just as someone who lives in his district, I wish that he would spend less time working on these leaks and all of these investigations into Donald Trump Jr., who he obviously has personal dislike for, and of course the president who calls him Little Adam Schiff, and maybe come to his district every once in a while, because I'll tell you what, Seb, you want to talk about the word carpetbagging.
Yeah.
This guy lives in Maryland. He has a 600 square foot apartment that he keeps in the city of Burbank in California. That's where all the television studios are. He's got a small little apartment.
Of course, it's close to the TV studios. Of course, it's close to the TV studios.
I'm telling you, you can't be too far from a television camera.
Right.
That's for sure. That's one of the rules.
So what do people think of him? People like you who live in his district, they give up and they resign themselves to the people who re-elect people like this, or is there something moving? Is there something in the water out there?
The problem is he didn't even have to run this time. It was, you talk about Adam Schiff. Brad Sherman is another person that you might see nationally who is also a local representative in Southern California. He's the one that filed articles of impeachment against the president on day one that the Democratic Congress, they took majority in the House of Representatives. These two didn't even have to run a campaign in California. I think their opponents each got about 20% of the vote. Their name is all they need on a ballot, because California voters go and they vote for the Democrat, and they didn't really even have serious challengers. Adam Schiff had a challenger who is the nicest man on the planet, but didn't get any traction because he didn't really have any name recognition. And these California conservatives, there are a few of us here who actually could maybe create some kind of run against people like Adam Schiff. They choose not to do it because they feel like they're going to get bullied, or they might lose their businesses because of it. It's so insane how Democrats have this stronghold over California voters that it's almost just a coronation. They did one debate, and it literally lasted for 40 minutes during the midterm election in 2018.
That's it? One debate?
One debate, and it was, by the way, a tag team debate where it was Adam Schiff and Brad Sherman against Mark Reed, who was running against Brad Sherman during the midterms, and then Johnny Nambadian, who was running against Adam Schiff. 40 minutes, the two of them did it together. It was insane. They refused to meet them at any other time to actually talk through issues and provide alternatives. So these guys just kind of hide out and they win re-election. And it's programs, it's not only just people being complacent and there being more Democratic voters in the state than Republican voters, but there are also these new voting techniques. And I know we've talked about this, but ballot harvesting has been huge and had a huge impact on how these elections are turning out that only help people like Adam Schiff, because you've got advocates, you have people who are working, in their favor in their district, and now they're going and collecting multiple ballots and turning in all of these ballots at one time, and the people who are actually voting them, they never have to even show up at the polling place or even put them into the mailbox on their own.
This is the man who is the chairman of the Intelligence Committee. Incredible. You've been listening to Jennifer.
Anything to do with Donald Trump, their campaign, the meeting with Veselnitskaya. So far as we can tell, it had nothing to do with it, and it certainly doesn't show that Donald Trump himself said any lies about this meeting at all.
Once again, it shows that Donald Trump had nothing to do with anything even remotely close to a Russian collusion or a Russian obstruction or anything in that matter whatsoever. Once again, we see Adam Schiff being proven wrong. I don't think the guy has said anything when it comes to this entire Mueller investigation.
He doesn't know how to tell the truth.
Panned out to be even 1/100th correct. Yet he's in charge of the Intelligence Committee.
You're absolutely right, Alex. Can I just give examples of some of the stories that Adam Schiff has himself spread? Firstly, in the first meeting of the House Intelligence Committee, which he attended, he was waiving the Trump dossier. This is this bizarre dossier that Christopher Steele had produced, and he was basically basing his questions on that dossier, made absolutely clear to everybody that he thought that dossier was true. And in fact, he continues to claim that that dossier is true, or at least has not been proved to be untrue, which is a bizarre formulation when you think about it. Actually, that's not true either, but let's leave it. So he was peddling the Trump dossier before. He's still peddling it now. He also claimed, and by the way, after one of our programs a little while ago, I checked this, but he also claimed in one of those early hearings that Roger Stone was somehow the person who was passing emails that had been hacked to WikiLeaks. Well, we now know from the indictment that is completely not true, and that Roger Stone had no role in any of that. I mean, the idea that he ever did, it is ridiculous. He also claimed in a long memo that he wrote in response to the Republican memo of a year ago that the Trump dossier was not used to any significant degree in getting the FISA warrants on Carter Page. Well, we know that isn't true either. I mean, we know that in fact it was the foundation of the evidence that was used to get those FISA warrants. So Adam Schiff has been repeatedly proved wrong. In fact, I'm going to say something about Adam Schiff. I think, personally, that he is the person who is behind many of these stories we read in the media, which I am sure are being pushed by his own staffers from his own office. He has set himself up as the Grand Inquisitor in the House of Representatives on all things related to Russiagate. Now, it is falling apart, and now we see that this latest conspiracy theory that he constructed around the Trump Tower meeting, in which he tried to connect Donald Trump himself into that meeting, that too has now been proved wrong and has bitten the dust. Now, can I just say something else about that, which is, I think, important to hold on to? Adam Schiff is a lawyer. He has a legal background. I believe that he was a prosecutor himself. You do not make allegations that there was some kind of conversation between Donald Trump Jr. and Donald Trump without proof. He never had any proof that those two had spoken to each other. All he knew is that Donald Trump Jr., from his telephone records, which Donald Trump Jr. himself released, had had certain conversations. He had no basis to think that those conversations were with Donald Trump. He had no basis to think that those conversations had any connection to the Veselnitskaya meeting. He was only guessing, and yet he spread stories based on those guesses, which have fanned this Russiagate investigation, and we now know that those guesses were wrong.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that he's one of the big leakers in this entire Mueller investigation, this Russiagate investigation. I also tend to think that Adam Schiff was a nobody before Russiagate. No one had ever heard about this guy. I mean, he was a nothing.
Yep.
They put him in this position to promote this entire Russiagate thing, to spread the lies, to spread the leaks. He went along with it, and for that, he got promoted to where he is now in charge of the Intelligence Committee. He was a nothing before Russiagate. He owes his entire career to spreading false allegations against the U.S. president. Is he going to apologize to the American people for all the lies that he has spread, for all the discourse that he has spread, for all the nonsense that he has spread? Is he going to apologize? He is such a tool. Will he apologize?
Of course not. I mean, Adam Schiff is never going to apologize. You're absolutely right. I'd never heard of Adam Schiff until all this started. He's done very well out of this affair in career terms. He's done very well out of this affair by spreading gossip, rumor, innuendo, conspiracy theories. He's been the spinmeister in chief. And as I said before, repeatedly, what he says has been shown to be untrue. But Adam Schiff, to be absolutely clear about this, is a clever man. He knows exactly what he's doing. He is certainly not going to apologize for it. He is not the apologizing type. He doesn't impress me as the kind of man who makes apologies at all. Perhaps he should. He should certainly apologize to Donald Trump for some of the things he said about him. But of course, he never will.
It's incredible that you have these guys so high up in government. It says a lot about the U.S. government, if you want my opinion, the U.S. Congress. If this guy was in any other job, in any other company, anywhere in the world, he wouldn't last a week.
Well, the reason this is happening...
He is afraid. He is nervous. He doesn't know what to do. He is trying to change the rules because he knows he is screwed. So the incoming House Intelligence Committee Chairman, Adam Schiff, called the Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel to reevaluate its opinion that a sitting president can't be indicted under circumstances in which the failure to do so may mean that person escapes justice. Wow. Is he projecting right now?
Yes.
And is he trying to change the rules because he realizes that he is stuck right now? And I hate to say this, but there's nothing there that they can use to indict the president.
Agent of the Russian government, is she not? That's a big question. From the Fusion GPS side of this thing, you know, she's dispatched, she makes the meeting, and then she's recovered, and then debriefs. This is classic, the Soviet-era term would be agitprop, agitation propaganda. It doesn't matter what she said or did in that meeting, what she offered, whether it was a value or a waste of time or anything else. From the perspective of Fusion GPS, all they want is this murky Russian attorney meeting with Trump people. That's all they're looking for. And so they had mission accomplished when she walked in the door, shook hands, said hello, and sat down. From their perspective, in this sort of information operation to generate this hysteria, they're just looking to establish a Russian contact. And they were successful from that perspective because we're still talking about it. I'm here today trying to explain to you the techniques that were involved in trying to generate hysteria over a non-event. And so you have an agent provocateur, you have Veselnitskaya, somebody who's coming in to provoke, to create a sort of tension or crisis or problem. This agent provocateur uses a walk-in type meeting to talk to officials and close associates of then candidate Trump. The event occurs, it turns out to be a big nothing by everyone's account. Everyone kind of walks away disgusted. But Fusion GPS gets what they're looking for. They get a shadowy Russian attorney in a secret meeting at Trump Tower. And so let the hysteria begin, and let the spinning and the double talk go on and on and on. And then when questioned later by the Senate Judiciary Committee, Glenn Simpson suddenly develops a form of amnesia. Well, he's not entirely sure, and the dates may have been this or that. And, well, yeah, we did meet on the 8th, and yeah, we did meet on the 10th. And there was a meeting at Trump Tower on the 9th, but we didn't discuss that, which is preposterous, right? That doesn't pass the giggle test. You have this Russian attorney going in the meeting with the candidates, senior representatives, and somehow you're supposed to believe that that wasn't a topic or a subject of conversation. It's implausible, it's unbelievable, but it's important that you see this from a perspective other than what, you get either 8-second sound bites or you get media spin around this. You need to look at it as an intelligence operation. You've got an opposition entity, Fusion GPS and Glenn Simpson, who've ginned up this phony dossier, by Christopher Steele, who are feeding this information through Fusion GPS employee Nellie Orr, wife of Bruce Orr, at the time the number 4 guy over at the Justice Department. So they're feeding this information into the system to generate this Russia hysteria, and then you have this orchestrated meeting where there's a Fusion GPS Veselnitskaya meeting on the 8th. On the 9th, she goes into Trump Tower. On the 10th, she comes out and gets debriefed by Fusion GPS. She's a shadowy figure who's changed her story repeatedly as to what exactly she was doing and who she works for. There's this contact with senior officials. From the outside, from just the optics of what went on, it provides the perfect opportunity to let Fusion GPS, wave their arms and scream, because they've created this perception that they can then wave around in the press about secret meetings with Russians, and it's all based on nothing.
Very much. No one, to my recollection, asked, so what's coming next from the Russians? How might we stop it? What's the future look like? It was all, what can we say about what they did and how it affects the election that we just had?
Comey then asked to meet alone with Trump to warn him about that now infamous Steele dossier, unverified information on Trump's ties to Russia, including allegations of Trump's encounters with prostitutes in Moscow.
I'm about to meet with a person who doesn't know me. He's just been elected President of the United States by all accounts, and from my watching him during the campaign, could be volatile. And I'm about to talk to him about allegations that he was involved with prostitutes in Moscow and that the Russians taped it and have leverage over him.
It's obvious that he doesn't know what he's talking about. It's obvious he can't control his mind or his tongue. And what I've suggested, if now, because he's the nominee for the party, and he's entitled to briefings from the CIA, for example, I said publicly, give him fake briefings. Pretend you're briefing. Don't tell him anything that you don't want to get out. And that's how I feel about it. I think that the man is a loose cannon. I think he's done so much to hurt our country with our international relations already.
But as a Republican nominee, isn't he entitled to get those briefings?
Give him fake briefings.
What does that even mean?
It means they'll tell him stuff. He won't know the difference.
You're basically telling the intelligence community to lie to him.
No, I'm not going to lie to you, but I still have to tell you everything. Why, if this was salacious, and this particular part of the dossier unverified, still unverified, by the way?
Yes. So far as when I...
All right, this is sad news. Everything we have been telling you for months. We have been reporting for months that the media has ignored for over a year has been confirmed this weekend. I want you to pay very close attention. It gets somewhat complicated, but it's a sad chapter in American history. You have a Trump campaign associate. His name is Carter Page. He was spied on during the height of the 2016 election by Barack Hussein Obama's DOJ through the use of a FISA warrant, the hardest warrant to get. And tonight we know for sure, totally confirmed that the justification for this warrant was a document. You've heard it before. The unverified, uncorroborated, phony dossier put together by a foreign national with funneled money through a law firm to an op research group paid for by Hillary Clinton and the DNC. And by the way, this was all full of Russian lies.
That is correct. Under oath, that's what Andy McCabe said. And clearly, from Mr. Gowdy and Mr. Radcliffe and those guys who have done this type of work in the past and our investigators, they've been shocked at this FISA from the beginning when we first laid eyes onto it because of just the fact that you would use unverified information in the first place. Now, but let's just get past that. Let's just say, okay, that if you believe, like some people in the media are trying to say, which is, no, you actually don't have to verify it. You just have to give the court everything that there is. Right?
Well, wait a minute. If you commit a fraud on the court or you present evidence that you don't know to be true and you're presenting it as if it is true, as required by the
That's false evidence.
statute itself and by FBI protocol, and you purposely withhold that who paid for the document and only put a little asterisk saying it might have a political taint to it, you're not telling the court the truth. Aren't you perpetrating a fraud upon the court?
Well, look, I believe you are. This is why we called this investigation about FISA abuse. Look, I believe there was a conspiracy here to actually obfuscate that dossier and the information they put in the FISA, so that they actually clouded it so that they could get this through the court. But what's left, what's still redacted, is what Comey called the mosaic. And that's why this is so important, because the American public deserves to know, well, what was the rest of the information? Because and this should tell people a lot, Sean. Why, right when the FISA was released, it was leaked to the New York Times a couple weeks ago. And what was it? What was their first messaging, the narrative that they tried to build right out of that? This proves that Devin Nunes and the House Republicans were liars. Well, that lasted about a whole 12 hours because I said, actually, no.
Just the opposite was true.
Yeah, because it was true. And you also had them saying, well, the really juicy stuff, not only were Nunes and the Republicans lying, the real juicy stuff is in the redacted part. Well, then we actually showed a letter. Well, wait a second. We actually asked President Trump to declassify this a couple months ago, and here's the page. Ever since that happened, you do not see anybody in the left. I'm talking about from the Democratic Party to the media, the hard media left, mainstream media left, to the Comey people. They are dead silent. They don't want those pages released. They're hoping that this issue goes away, which is why it's so imperative that President Trump declassify at least these 20 pages. And I'm hopeful that he will. And the sooner he does,
I have sources, and you're not one of them, just to be very clear here. But I have sources that have been telling me now for some time that if the 20 pages are released with corroborating emails with them, that it will actually blow the entire Russian narrative out of the water, and it will be done, over, and finished. And I've been assured this by numerous sources. Have I been told the truth?
Well, Sean, what I don't want to do is, you never want to build expectations, okay? Because I believe from the beginning, being that the dossier made up the bulk of that FISA, and that the FBI was willing to take that information and feed it to a court, that's bad enough. This is, I believe, equally as bad, the actions and activities that were being taken. But, it all depends on who covers it, right? What's ultimately going to be enough for anybody who's honest and fair in the mainstream media to take this up?
Well, you're answering your own question, because they have not been fair. They're agenda-driven, and I'm making an argument that I think that journalism in America is dead, and that they are only an extension of the Democratic Party at this point, and pretty much state-run left-wing media. But the question is, I almost shudder to think if the dossier was the bulk of the evidence, and there's something far worse that they used to get the FISA application through and past judges, it has to be fairly monumental. I don't even know if I can render a guess at what it is.
Well, and look, and that's why I'm in this horrible position of not being able to comment on it. I will just tell you,
Is it worse than the FISA? Let me ask you this: is it worse than the dossier itself?
I would say that it's equal. It's equal. It's about the same. Like if you think it was bad for a political party to dig up,
is it all four of them? Is it all four? I mean, the only thing that I can think of that might be that bad would be, you know, that we had foreign intelligence people inside the Trump campaign. We already know they had spies in there. I mean, how bad is this going to get?
Well, look, it's tough for me to comment, and I don't
want you to do anything that is going to put you in a compromising position. And you know, just so people know that you have always been respectful of the idea of keeping your top security clearance secrets. I'm not asking you ever to break that pledge or vow. I would never want you to.
And obviously, Sean, all the Republicans on the Intelligence Committee who have been briefed on this for months and months and months, we all say that we want these pages out. I mean, so clearly there's a reason why we want that out. And, you know, we're the ones that are charged with getting this info, you know, of overseeing this for all of the American people and the Republican, and at least on the Republican side. And I think that should carry a lot of weight, and it ought to be enough for the president to declassify. At the same time, I know I'm limited on time, and I don't want to run out of time here, and I don't know if you're going to cover it on your show today, but Senator Grassley has very directly called for what are called the Bruce Orr 302s to be released. These also need to be declassified. Now, Bruce Orr, just for your audience, I know your audience is pretty well up to speed, and I know you are. Bruce Orr was effectively the number 2 or 3 under the Deputy Attorney General, both Sally Yates and Rod Rosenstein. His office was just a couple doors down. His wife, Nellie Orr, was working for Fusion GPS, which was digging up the dirt, or basically, I don't even think they were digging anything. I think they were just making.
Wasn't she part of the team that was putting together the dirty dossier?
Yeah, so she was the one working for Fusion, working with Christopher Steele to compile this. At the same time, Bruce Orr, one of the top people at the Justice Department, was secretly meeting with who?
Christopher
Steele.
Yeah.
So Chuck Grassley has asked for about a dozen of these 302s, which are it's a number of FBI reports. He wants them declassified. I've seen them. We have the Bruce Orr note.
I have been hearing rumors for a long time that these 302s were altered and changed after the fact.
Well, I think that is referring to the General Flynn 302. I don't think that the Bruce Orr 302s were changed, but remember what we're saying here. One of the top guys in the Department of Justice, a guy who's supposed to be in management, Christopher Steele, gets fired, right? Gets terminated. The FBI says we're not going to use him anymore. But actually they were. They actually took one of the top DOJ lawyers, and essentially he ran Steele as a source. So Bruce Orr just took the place of
Let's not forget Senator Warren tried for 2 weeks to meet with Steele to get dirt on Trump. Senator Warner,
remember, Christopher
big fucking dickhead, big fucking dickhead.
Not win. That was in our memo that we released back in January.
We will stop him.
Ignored that.
We will stop him, and Christopher Steele on the other end. That's right. He wanted to stop him as well.
Right.
Is there any truth to the fact that John Brennan had shared the dossier information as CIA director with Harry Reid?
You know, it is. We have no proof of that, but I'll tell you.
But we do know Harry Reid said on CNN to give Trump fake intel that he wouldn't know the difference.
Reid, we have that documented. Reid writes a letter. You actually have Strzok and Page discussing on text and emails about the letter that's coming from Reid.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it really looks like that was kind of your classic swampy move of writing a letter.
I think that will be. I believe that will be corroborated, and I have reason to believe that, and there might be emails that would back that up. All right, we got to take a break. We'll come back more with the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes, who's agreed to stay with us. Listen,
the Republicans on the House Intelligence Committee have said that this needs to be declassified. That should carry that. We're the legislative branch of government, and that should carry weight with the White House. Mm-hmm. You already have the first part of the FISA that's been publicly released. We're not asking for everything, but at a minimum, those roughly 20 pages.
Is that for every FISA application or just the last FISA application?
Well, we're only asking. We're specifically asking for the very last one.
The one Rod Rosenstein signed.
That's correct. But, you know, we're not That's what we want out of
Should
it.
ask for all of them. Fuck it, let's see the whole can of beans.
But that needs to get out. That's what we've asked the president.
Well, I hear it's coming, and I hear it's a blockbuster. So we're waiting. I think the people have a right to know, the people of this country, because what we know already is so underhanded, it's so corrupt, and such an abuse of power that I think people need to understand how deeply this went. Let me ask you about this. We're watching the Manafort trial, and it's about a 2005 tax case. And as the judge in the case said, that has nothing to do with collusion or Russia even at all, or Donald Trump or the campaign at all. But it's really designed to put the screws to Manafort so he sings or composes, and they can use information to prosecute or impeach Trump. And my question very specifically is, there is a tape of a counterpart of yours on the House Intel Committee by the name of Adam Schiff. Have you heard this tape where he thinks he's talking to a Russian? Listen to this.
Okay, and so Buseva met with Trump in New York at some point after the 2013 Miss Universe
yes.
pageant.
Absolutely, and she got compromising materials on Trump after their short relations.
Okay, and what's the nature of the compromise?
Well, there were pictures of naked Trump.
Okay. And so Putin was making
Yeah, see, that's Senator Warner.
The availability of the compromising
Yes, of course. Buseva shared those materials with Sobchak, and Sobchak shares those materials with Putin, because she's a goddaughter of Putin, and Putin decided to press on Trump.
And the materials that you can provide to the committee or to the FBI, would they corroborate this allegation?
Sure, of course. When they were in Ukraine, we got their conversation by the phone where they discussed those compromising materials. We are ready to provide it to FBI.
So you have recordings of both Sobchak and Buseva where they're discussing the compromising material on Mr. Trump?
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to come back. We'll get a response now.
Election Day, August 7th, matters. It matters for this special election for the 12th Congressional District. This is the only Congressional District race special election between now and November. It matters in Franklin County and the state capital. It matters in Columbus and Delaware. It matters in my hometown of Richland County. It matters in Morrow County. It matters where I played basketball from time to time in high school in Marion County. It matters in Licking and Muskingum counties. It matters all over the state, and it matters in the country. Not only can we all have a good progressive congressman, Danny O'Connor, represent us in Central Ohio, it matters nationally when we send a message and we simply say, in Ohio, we are back. Vote August 7th for Danny O'Connor, or even better.
How about we vote Danny O'Connor out and make him lose, and then we take your seat too, Sherrod Brown. I have watched in committee meetings and Senate floor speaking, and you are a truly piece of shit. If you ever think you're going to get your ass anywhere near that White House, you are sorely mistaken. You are probably one of the most dangerous, ill-mannered, incompetent pieces of shit in Congress.
Do early vote between now and August 7th.
I have every expectation that there will be many opportunities for these 42 individuals to come to Congress, even though they have tried to wait us out. And I think they'd love to see Republicans lose. And I say that, I hate to say that, but I have to believe that the Department of Justice and FBI, the people at the leadership, they are banking on a loss by the Republicans in the fall, which is why people have to understand how important it's going to be to get out and vote in this election to ensure that the members of Congress are returned that are actively involved to ensure, because if the Democrats get control, they're going to drop all of this investigation.
Toll free, our number is 800-941-SEAN if you want to be a part of the absolutely have been, well, that will so devastate the process in terms of corroborating the lie to the FISA court judges in the applications to get a warrant to spy on a Trump campaign associate in the lead up to the 2016 campaign. We're hearing rumors all over the place that this information, corroborated by emails, could be coming out as early as next week. And if it does, I am told it will blow a lot of this Russia lie narrative out of the water, and it will cause America to take a deep look at whether or not we have equal justice under the law, whether or not the warrant system for FISA was abused at a level we've never seen before. And joining us to talk and discuss about all this is the House Intel Committee Chairman, Devin Nunes. Mr. Chairman, before the break, I played you a phone conversation of a colleague of yours. He's on TV an awful lot, Adam Schiff, and he's not exactly been kind to you in public comments. And he is talking to somebody he believes to be a Russian that has compromising materials on Donald Trump, including naked pictures that even Vladimir Putin had seen. It turns out that he was totally hoaxed in this call, but the whole call sounds to me an awful lot like the collusion that Robert Mueller is supposed to be getting to the bottom to.
Yeah, bingo. So it's a typical double standard, right? So they created a whole investigation made out of a whole cloth that somehow Donald Trump was colluding with Russia, using a dossier that was actually generated from Russians that the Clinton campaign paid for. So they should start there, investigate the Clinton campaign on getting information and compromise from the Russians. And then they have to turn around. If you look at what the Democrats on our committee have done, and probably in the Senate also, they were also reaching out to Russians to get dirt on Trump. I mean, it's just nonsense. I mean, look, collusion, none of this is a crime, getting dirt on your political opponents. I mean, it happens all the time. But the whole idea that they'd investigate the Trump campaign for supposedly being in bed with Russians, when the reality was...
Hey, dude.
Collecting everything we do is to make predictive models. And again, it goes back to population control, as you mentioned, not in the number of people on the planet, but controlling and being able to do that through the manipulation of their data and understanding their actions before they even take them. When you have such a large set of metadata being collected, isn't that just asking for them to encapsulate the skills of someone like yourself and put that into artificial intelligence so that they can have Bill Binney, even when Bill Binney doesn't want to work there anymore, they have your knowledge encapsulated and they're able to predictively model people in a way that learns using time series analysis and a bunch of other fancy techniques that basically takes in all this data, and with a high predictability factor, they can tell you what you're going to be doing, what you're going to be eating. And I think some of the places are using this now for commercial marketing to tell, they can predict where you're going to go from your Google searches and whatnot.
Yes, and unfortunately, that's the part that I never left with them. Okay, I never did that for them. So they didn't have that to be able to use it. That's why the President's Big Data Initiative just help us find out what's important in this big data, because they can't do that. And that's really, it gets much more complicated when you when you try to fuse all the activities of individuals or groups of individuals into from multiple domains like phones and emails and travel and banking, and you try to merge all the activity of everyone in that group or an individual alone. Just trying to do that becomes much more involved and much more complicated. And more difficult for them anyway, to index. First you have to get these databases indexed. Each one has a graph. You have to relate the graphs. You got to relate the content and index that and pull it all together and then put it in a timeline and try to make sense of it. How do you assess the interactions of groups of people in a timeline? For example, if you're looking at dope smuggling, the person in, say, Colombia wants to sell dope to somebody in the United States. They have to make a connection to agree on the sale. Then the person has to agree on the price, right? And then they have to transfer the money, and they've got to transport it from Colombia up to the United States. So there's all kinds of transactions that have to occur. All those kind of interactions happen in the communities that they're building, and you have to be able to recognize that. Well, how can you recognize that, right? That's the key too. They can't do that either yet, not yet by any means. So they're struggling with that. They're struggling just to find out what's important in the data, let alone put together and analyze the profiles and what's important in the profiles. We call that profiles of interest is what we call that. We never documented it for them, so they can't do it. But we defined it for them as combinations of things that would imply there's intentions and capabilities to perform certain acts, like dope smuggling, arms smuggling, an attack, any kind of thing like that. For example, the 9/11 crowd did a typical military attack profile. They showed that the military profiles will simply be the military moves to positions to prepare for the attack. In other words, those takeoff positions for the attack. They prepare for the attack by setting up their command and control system, and then they execute the attack from there. But you can see that movement and shuffling to get in position to do that, and that's a pretty typical military action. Well, the terrorists did exactly the same thing. They moved to hotels next to airports and then bought the tickets for the airplanes and then got on the airplanes simultaneously. So you could see that build up. That was an obvious attack coming.
What are some of the things about 9/11, 13 years later, that disturb you that might not have been investigated properly, or what are some of the anomalies or things that are like a splinter in your mind about 9/11?
Well, in the intelligence arena, there's of course the inadequate search of the database that NSA did, and after the fact, they found the data and then covering it up and not letting it be exposed to the congressional investigations or the 9/11 Commission, to my knowledge, anyway. So that meant that they didn't have those aspects to deal with and couldn't deal with it in terms of their reports or in their studies. And so, and then there's the physical issues. I've been talking to some physicists recently and engineers and so on, and they have a coalition of people, the 9/11 Truth Group, which is saying there are certain aspects of 9/11, the physical nature of how the things occurred, that should have been addressed by these different studies, and have not been physical things, observable acts like molten metal in the buildings, coming out of the buildings, and like that certain temperatures physics requires certain temperatures for that to occur, and how you can't get that kind of temperature in a fire in a building like that.
So you can't identify the source of what's causing that.
Right, but that's a physical fact that should have been addressed and dealt with. And also Building 7 falling straight on its footprint, that kind of thing is suspicious. How could a building like that fall that way? And that was not even addressed. So none of those things, or some of the other things they were showing me, were also suspicious that they should have addressed, and they didn't. And so none of the studies came out with those. So that's basically a very bad. Even NIST didn't do that. I mean, that's not good science at all. I mean, you don't ignore facts that don't fit your preconceived outcome. In other words, if I wanted to solve a crypt problem and I had a preconceived idea of how it went there, and any fact that came along about that system that didn't fit my preconceived idea, I threw them away, I would always fail, never solve any of them.
Was there anything else with 9/11 that got your attention that you thought, this is really strange, and with all the budget power that we have focused on defense in this country, that there were multiple layers of failure that kind of coalesced to bring that event about?
Well, I mean, it was on virtually every level. They were all pretty much out to lunch for that attack, and they ignored the basic things that they should never have ignored. Certainly, if I was aware of them, I wouldn't have hesitated in notifying people. But I would do it on the gray phone. No, so.
Can the public resist the tyranny that it doesn't know exists?
Well, that's the whole point. First you have to have knowledge of it. You have to have an informed electorate to be able to make a decision politically, and you have to have an informed population for them to make a decision whether or not they want this kind of activity with their government doing this or not. I mean, unless they know for sure. I mean, the government continues to lie that they don't collect content, but they've been doing this all along on everybody that they can possibly get. The Fairview program shows all the tap points that they're using to do that. They're recording all your phone calls. If you're a target, you get transcribed and you're monitored all the time on everything you do and say. And it's all stored and searchable by FBI or DEA or anybody else in the government that they allow access to it. They are accumulating all this metadata on everybody you're related to and storing recordings of everybody else's conversations they can possibly get. So that's how Tim Clementi, ex-FBI agent, could come on CNN right after the Boston bombings and say that the intelligence community and the FBI have ways and means of getting back to a phone conversation that one of the Tsarnaev brothers had with his wife prior to the bombing. Well, the only way you can get back to it is because they've recorded it. And it's stored and indexed, and so they can get back to it and transcribe it. That's how they do that. I mean, that's the data that I'm sure they only have a window of time to look at that data, probably something on the order of a month, 20 to 30 days, perhaps, something like that. It takes a lot of digital storage space to do that, so, but they've certainly got they've certainly had the money to do it, so, and they've according to the Fairview program, they certainly have the tapping points to do it.
What's the role of propaganda in a totalitarian regime?
Well, it's to buffalo the people into thinking something is happening when it's not. It's the narrative of the administration that's in charge that they want the public to believe it, and they use that propaganda, various techniques like repetitive assertions, multiple people saying the same thing adds credibility, supposedly. You know, and whether or not it's people from the administration, people from Congress, or people from the courts, you know. So getting people in multiple disciplines and multiple levels of the administration saying the same thing over and over and over again gets people over time thinking that that's really true, when in fact it's not.
What can be done to fix the NSA?
We had 21 suggestions that we, the group of NSA whistleblowers, put together to suggest to President Obama. We sent it in to him, and also to the members of Congress, also all the members of the EU, because they're involved too. Their countries are involved indirectly or directly in it. So we sent all that into them, and the two main thrusts of that program was, one, they needed to stop bulk collection and do a focused collection on data to begin with. That is, pull nothing into storage except data that was relevant to specific groups of people or within zones of suspicion around them. Everybody else should be given privacy and just let all their data go by. And so therefore you don't need to build Bluffdale or anything like that. You just need to focus on that unique high value set of information. Also, you have other rules, for example, that you would use against terrorists. For example, if they have a cell phone or a satellite phone that they're using in the mountains of Afghanistan, you want to look at them to see whether or not they're involved in a terrorist activity or involved in terrorism in one way or another. Or if you have the similar kind of thing happening in the jungles of Colombia or Peru, somewhere in there, well, you might suspect them of being a dope dealer or a member of the FARC, the terrorist group down there. So if you see that, you want
Capitol Hill Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Lindsey Graham of South Carolina demanding answers from the FBI on the now, third infamous raid, this case, Roger Stone's home in Tampa, Florida. Why did the FBI send, 27 agents armed with rifles, body armor to arrest Stone for lying to Congress? He's not El Chapo. The senator also wants to know if CNN fake news was tipped off by the Mueller team to get their exclusive footage, of course, of this raid. Oh, they picked the perfect day. Joining us now with reaction to all this breaking news tonight, Senator Lindsey Graham. Wait, you were in New York. Good to see you. What are you doing?
Thank you very much.
I don't think that was about abortion in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Right.
You once sponsored a bill that I agree with.
Well, I have it right now. How many nations in the world allow abortion on demand after 20 weeks, which is the 5th month? 7. 7 nations in the entire world allow abortion on demand after 20 weeks. They're talking about abortion during the actual birthing. So my bill says, unless there's a life of the mothers at stake, result of rape or incest, you can't have abortion on demand in the 5th month. I think most Americans...
So you'd have 4 months to decide.
Most Americans will be fine with that.
Let me go to this letter to Director Wray.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I kind of expect and have expected more out of Director Wray, because under James Comey, we now have 2 criminal investigations ongoing, the General Counsel and his Deputy Director. I think there should be far more. We hopefully will get to that. You have said you will get into this. Talk about what should he do? Why are we doing this to people for process crimes? And why does it never happen to all the other liberals like Clapper, Brennan, Mills, Abedin, all these other people that have lied to Congress? Why don't they get the pre-dawn raid?
So let me tell you my job. My job is to provide oversight to the Department of Justice as the Judiciary Chairman. Love the FBI, respect them.
So do I.
But somebody needs to watch those who watch us. I'm going to tell you all I can about the FISA warrant and how you used an unverified dossier paid for by a political party
Hillary Clinton.
Without any verification, how that was
Russian lies.
Yeah, so
how ironic.
But I want to know why to execute a search warrant with somebody who had a lawyer. The best way to get Roger Stone is to tell him CNN wants to talk to you. He'll show up wherever you want him to show up. Right. So the bottom line is, this seems to me over the top, and I don't know what the message was being sent, but I personally didn't like it.
They want a gag order.
Now, I've been a prosecutor, defense attorney. It seemed to be sending the wrong message. That if you cross Mueller, look what's going to happen to you.
Yep.
Mueller, do your job, but these tactics are unacceptable given the level of threat.
Let it happen.
I look at his team. He has a Clinton Foundation attorney, only Democratic donors, no Republican donors, and the man who was excoriated for withholding exculpatory evidence, put 4 innocent people in jail, overturned Fifth Circuit, tens of thousands of Enron employees, Enron accounting, lost their jobs. He lost 9-0 in the Supreme Court. He's the lead guy.
Yeah. Well, if they're sending a message, I'm sending a message to them. You're accountable to the Congress, and we're going to find out what you. Well, they better answer my letter.
Okay.
If I were them, I would.
And we'll get to the bottom of FISA. Somebody signed off on something they didn't verify and didn't corroborate.
Just put it this way. What if the roles were reversed? What if the Republican Party hired a former British agent to go to Russia to dig up dirt on Hillary Clinton
and hated Clinton,
and everything in the dossier was a bunch of BS? Do you think that might be front page news everywhere all the time?
You're the Grassley Graham memo.
That conversation consisted of?
Well, according to the IG report, which I do quote in my testimony, they had this conversation regarding the Clinton Foundation investigation in August of 2016. McCabe said that the Justice Department expressed concerns about FBI agents taking overt steps in the Clinton Foundation investigation during the presidential campaign. According to McCabe, he pushed back asking, "Are you telling me that I need to shut down a validly predicated investigation?" McCabe told us, the IG, that the conversation was very dramatic. He had never had a similar confrontation before with DOJ. But prior to that, senior DOJ officials refused FBI requests to issue subpoenas on Clinton Foundation issues earlier in 2016, according to reports. And that, since then, supposedly there's been a new investigation launched, but I haven't seen any of the indicia of a serious investigation by the Justice Department yet.
Well, I would agree that that was a very dramatic conversation, and McCabe said, as you mentioned there, that he had never had a conversation like this in his career at the FBI. Do you believe that this demonstrates that the Justice Department was actively trying to protect the Clinton Foundation from an FBI investigation?
Yes.
Yeah, it's just one of, I think, a few pieces of evidence demonstrating that the Clinton Foundation was being protected by the Justice Department, especially during that election year. These pay-to-play allegations, for instance, that we uncovered, these emails, they came out in August of 2016. Not that we timed them to come out in August 2016. That was a result of the Justice Department taking 8-9 months to release them to us, or the State Department taking 8-9 months to release them to us after they received them from Hillary Clinton and Miss Abedin. So this was a very tricky time period, and so I can imagine there was pressure on the FBI and Justice Department to do something.
What, in your opinion, would be the reason that they were trying to protect the Clinton Foundation?
Well, the Justice Department at the time was working with the Clinton campaign to target President Trump. They were targeting President Trump. One of the key folks involved in that was Peter Strzok, who's had a demonstrated bias as an FBI official against Mr. Trump and for Mrs. Clinton. The irony of the McCabe situation is that McCabe is accused of leaking in pushback to the Justice Department, saying that we are investigating Hillary Clinton, which happened to be accurate, but was not something he was supposed to be telling the newspapers. That's why he allegedly lied about leaking to it.
Would you say
McCabe, there were some in the FBI who wanted to do this?
Would you say it's somewhat, at least causes some red flags for the Justice Department? It sounds, what you're alleging is that they were actively involved in trying to influence the election.
Oh, it sure does. I think this is an area that needs to be explored. I wish it had been explored by this Congress. It wasn't sufficiently. I know there was pushback from the DOJ, and I know there's all sorts of concerns about foreign interference in our elections, but when you have bureaucracies like the DOJ putting their thumbs on the scales, it's something that both parties ought to be concerned about, because, you know, one day the shoe will be on the other foot, politically speaking, and we just want to be able to restrain the agencies from being their own arm of branch of government.
So this may be another way of asking a similar question, at least a similar train of thought. Why would the Justice Department try to pressure the FBI to stop a perfectly valid investigation?
For political reasons. I mean, there were other investigations that were ongoing at the time before that concerned President or then candidate Trump and Hillary Clinton. So the complaint about overt steps targeting the foundation seemed to be, well, not credible. That's why Mr. McCabe reacted so strongly.
Well, I believe what you've just said is the whole reason we're here. And Mr. Hackney, although I appreciate your opinion, expressing why and how we need to do our oversight, what has just been said is the precise reason why we are doing oversight. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield that.
I thank the gentleman from